Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from Rao's IAS Study Circle. Hello everyone, we hope that you are preparing well for the upcoming preliminary examination, and now it is clear that 4th October is the date for Civil Services Prelims exam. Now we at Rao's IAS believe that you are well prepared to give your best and clear the prelims exam with ease. Right now, the most important thing that you must do is to practice few more mock papers, and the purpose of these mocks is two-pronged. One is to keep your nerves under control during the examination, and second is to revise as much as possible in these last 10 to 15 days. So in order to help you achieve these goals, we have initiated the pre-parikshan program just for you. And there will be two full-length tests that will help you test yourself on the 200 most important themes of the last 1 year. Now you shall attempt the test to see how well you are prepared in the exam, and if you are in a position to score 90 to 100 or more marks in the test, then you can be sure that you are going to clear the coming prelims exam with ease. It will also give you an opportunity to revise the most important themes as well, and this can be handy during this stage of the examination. So what are you waiting for? The registration link is in the description given below, and register yourself and be ready to test yourself on the same parameters on which UPSC is going to test you. So now let us take up the Daily News Simplified of the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 15 September 2020. And the articles that we are going to discuss today are displayed on your screen. So let us start our discussion. Now this article on page number 6 talks about the issues that are faced by the urban migrants. And in this context, it says that the economic distress that has been caused by the COVID-19 has exposed the vulnerabilities that are faced by these urban migrants who are generally employed in low paying, low productivity and informal jobs. Now these urban migrants have returned back to rural areas on account of the hardships that were caused by the COVID-19 pandemic and the ensuing lockdown. So in order to ease the distress that is caused to these workers, the government has allocated higher allocation to the MG Narega. So in this background, the authors say that such a solution of increasing the allocation to the Narega is only a temporary solution. And the long-term solution would be to reduce the vulnerabilities that are faced by the informal workers in the urban areas and also focus on higher job creation to reap the benefits of demographic dividend that India has right now. So in this background, let us understand the nature of employment situation in India, also how the employment situation has worsened because of COVID-19 pandemic, and also the suggestions that have been provided by the authors to boost the employment creation in urban areas. And some of the points that we are going to discuss in this article can become important for us from General Studies Paper 3 point of view under the topic Economic Development. Now we note that India had witnessed high GDP growth rate in the last 2 decades. However, this high GDP growth rate has not translated into higher employment creation. And that is why the growth that we have witnessed in the past 2 decades has sometimes been named as jobless growth. And that is because even when the Indian economy was witnessing growth, the amount of job creation was very less. Now, why was such a situation prevailing in India when the GDP was growing and the employment was not being created? Now, this has mainly been attributed to the stagnation in the manufacturing sector. And we note that India's GDP growth rate in the past 2 decades was led by the service sector. So there has not been ample employment generation because of stagnation in the share of manufacturing sector to India's GDP. And the share of manufacturing sector to India's GDP has been around 17% since the 1991 liberalization, privatization and globalization reforms that were announced by the government of India. Further, the manufacturing sector has not been growing because of dominance of small size firms, complexity in labor laws and issues with the land acquisition. And also, there is lack of skilling of the labor force in India. So these are some of the factors that have led to stagnation in the manufacturing sector, and that has in turn led to lower amounts of job creation in India, even when India has witnessed higher GDP growth rate in the past 2 decades. So the stagnation in the manufacturing sector is one of the important reasons for lower amount of job creation in India. Second important aspect about the nature of employment in India is that more number of jobs in India are concentrated in low paying, low productivity in formal sectors such as the construction, small-sized enterprises, etc. So there are twin problems with the employment situation in India. First is that the growth of India has been termed as jobless growth, and that is because the higher GDP growth rate has not translated into higher job creation. And even when the jobs have been created, they have been concentrated in the informal sector. So the nature of jobs is also a cause of concern for India. Thirdly, the laborers who work in the informal sectors face a lot of vulnerabilities such as poor wages, lack of access to social security benefits, poor skill sets, lack of effective representation through trade unions, and lack of access to basic facilities such as housing, sanitation, etc. And according to the International Labour Organization, these informal workers can be considered as working poor due to poor standard of living. So these are some of the issues with the employment situation in India where the growth rate has been termed as jobless growth. Also, the nature of jobs is also problematic because majority of the jobs that have been created are concentrated in low paying jobs. So now, how has the employment situation been worsened because of the COVID-19 pandemic? So according to a recent report that was published by the National Statistical Office, the GDP has contracted by about 24% in the first quarter of April to June of 2020 and 21. And this is a fall as compared to the 5% growth that was registered in the quarter 1 in the financial year 2019 and 20. So as you can see, there has been a drastic drop in the GDP of India. Now, one of the important aspects of this drop is that India has seen the contraction in GDP for the first time in the last 41 years since 1979. So this is also one of the greatest cause of concern for employment situation in India. And that is because GDP has seen contraction for the first time in last 41 years. Now, as you can see in this sphere, the COVID lockdown has hit all the sectors except the agriculture sector, which has only witnessed growth of about 3.4%, and besides that, all the sectors have seen a considerable drop. Now, what this highlights is that the employment intensive sectors such as the construction, trade, hotels, manufacturing, and mining have seen the largest contraction. And this contraction in the employment intensive sectors could have adverse implication both in terms of the increase in unemployment and also decrease in employment creation within the economy. So this means that the people who are working in these sectors may find themselves to be unemployment. And secondly, the ability of these sectors to create more jobs has been reduced significantly due to slowdown. So as we have seen here, the employment situation has worsened post COVID-19, and that has mainly been because of the contraction in GDP. And Indian economy is one of the worst hit economy due to COVID-19 pandemic. So after looking at the nature of employment situation in India, also how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the job creation, let us look at some of the suggestions that have been provided by the authors in this regard. So the authors say that India is witnessing a demographic dividend right now, and the share of working age population in the age group of 20 to 59 is set to increase from 50% in 2011 to 59% in 2041. And accordingly, India needs to put in a right strategy to create more number of jobs and reduce the vulnerabilities that are faced by the workforce. So regarding increasing the employment in the urban areas, the authors suggest an urban employment program. And they say that there is a need to launch an urban employment generation program on the lines similar to the MG Narega. And this program will fulfill twofold objectives of job creation and building durable assets such as the roads, housing, schools, hospitals, etc. in the urban areas. And such a program should be under the control of the local governments and should be implemented in close coordination with all the government departments. Secondly, there is a need for employment-intensive policies. And in this regard, there is a need for addressing various constraints which have hindered the creation of employment in India. And these can include labor reforms, ease of doing business, enhancing skill sets, hand-holding support to MSMEs, attracting investments to boost Make in India, etc. And creation of such an infrastructure would also reduce the vulnerabilities that are faced by the informal workers in the urban areas. So here we have seen the nature of employment in India, also how the employment has been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, and some of the suggestions that have been provided by the authors in this regard. With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, this article on page number 9 is related to the three agricultural reform bills that have been introduced in the Lok Sabha. And these three agri reform bills have been introduced to replace the ordinances that were announced during the lockdown period. Now, these ordinances were related to amendments in the Essential Commodities Act, the APMC Act, and also the legal framework for facilitating contract farming. Now, this move of the government of introducing these agricultural reform bills in the Lok Sabha have been opposed vehemently by the opposition parties as well as farmer organizations. So, in this background, let us look at the key aspects and what these ordinances aim at changing related to the Essential Commodities Act, the APMC Act, and also the contract farming. And they can be important for us from the General Studies paper 3 point of view in the topic economic development. So, in this background, let us first look at the key aspects of the Essential Commodities Act and also what are the key changes that are being sought by the government. Now, regarding the governance and the administrative reforms, the Government of India aims at amending the Essential Commodities Act in order to enable better price realization for the farmers. Now, what is this Essential Commodities Act and why was it enacted in the first place? So, this Essential Commodities Act was enacted in the year 1955. And this was enacted in order to make available certain commodities to the consumers at fair prices. And it is used by the Government of India to regulate the production, supply, and distribution of commodities which are declared as essential under this Act. Now, the list of items which are included under this Act include the drugs, fertilizers, pulses, edible oils, petroleum, and petroleum products. And the central government can add or remove a commodity from the schedule in consultation with the state governments. And one of the examples in the COVID-19 crisis is that in March 2020, the Union government declared masks and hand sanitizers as essential commodities under the Essential Commodities Act 1955. And this was done in order to ensure that they are available to the people at right price and in the right quality. So now if the center finds that a certain commodity is in short supply and its price is increasing, it can notify the stock holding limits on it for a specified period. And anybody trading and dealing in such a commodity is prevented from stockpiling it beyond a certain quantity. So what it does is that it improves the supplies and brings down the prices. So basically this act aims at improving the supplies of important commodities or products and also aims at checking the price variability in these products. However, one of the important criticisms of the Essential Commodities Act is that it has been hindering the agricultural marketing in India, and hence it is leading to failure in better price realization for the farmers. So now what are the important issues surrounding the Essential Commodities Act? So first is that the Essential Commodities Act fails to realize that stocking is essential for agriculture. Now, the fear of bringing agricultural commodities under this act has prevented traders and processors from undertaking bulk procurement of agricultural commodities even during the bumper harvest season. And hence, the increase in the agricultural production has not translated into higher income levels. And as most of the crops are seasonal in nature, so ensuring round the clock supply requires adequate buildup of stocks during the season. And that is why stocking is an essential part of agricultural marketing. However, as the traders fear that any particular product can be declared under the Essential Commodities Act and hence they refrain from stocking of such products. And as such, this kind of fear hinders the agricultural marketing of important agri products. Now, as the traders fear stocking any kind of product, it also leads to poor investment in the storage infrastructure. And this is because frequently stock limits are announced and as such the traders have not invested in better storage infrastructure. Now this also leads to adverse impact on the food processing industry. And we note that the food processing industries need to maintain large stocks in order to run their operations smoothly. And the stock limits which are imposed by this act curtails their operations. So, in such a situation, the large scale private investments are unlikely to flow into the food processing and the cold storage facilities sector. So, all these impacts are interconnected in nature. Again, there is impact on agricultural exports. So, whenever the government declares an agricultural commodity as essential, it imposes a number of restrictions on it, including the ban of export of such commodities. And this prevents the Indian farmers to get the best prices on their agricultural produce from the international markets. Again, this act has been touted as an outdated act, and it is said that this act is not in tune with the present times, and the act was enacted back in 1955 when we used to frequently face shortage of agricultural commodities. And because of the shortage of agricultural commodities, there was a need of government intervention to clamp down on black marketing and hoarding. However, now the situation has completely changed, and now we know that we have surplus production of agricultural products. And accordingly, we should give necessary freedom to the traders, aggregators, and food processing industries to undertake bulk procurement of agricultural commodities. So, now what is the new announcement? So the government will amend the Essential Commodities Act, and the agricultural foodstuffs, which will include the cereals, edible oils, oil seeds, pulses, onions, etc., shall be deregulated. That is, they will be made free from the controls which are imposed under the Essential Commodities Act. And the stock limits which are imposed will be imposed under very exceptional circumstances. And these exceptional circumstances will include the national calamities, famine, or with surge in prices of certain commodities. Further, no such stock limit shall apply to the processors or value chain participants. So these are the new announcements that have been made by the Government of India regarding the Essential Commodities Act, and important amendments will be made to this act to make the agricultural marketing more easy, and which will help in improving the agricultural processing and all the allied activities. Now, the second major administrative or governance reform related to the agriculture is related to agriculture marketing reforms. And these reforms aim at providing marketing choices to the farmers. So, now what is the background of agricultural marketing? Now, it should be noted that agriculture is a subject which is placed under the state list. And accordingly, the state governments have enacted their respective APMC acts. And these acts aim to regulate the marketing of agricultural commodities. However, the APMCs are considered to be highly restrictive and prohibitive, and hence they go against the interest of the farmers. Now, for example, the farmers are required to compulsorily sell their produce only to the registered traders in the APMCs, and they cannot sell their produce directly to the end consumers, processors, or exporters. Similarly, some of the states have restricted the farmers from selling their produce outside their APMC zones. However, such kind of restrictions are not applicable to the sale of industrial goods. So this shows that the agricultural commodities are not treated at parity with the industrial goods. So considering the fact that there are around 22,000 such APMCs, the APMC Act has led to fragmented marketing infrastructure. So accordingly, in order to bring about agricultural marketing reforms, the central government has come out with the Model Agricultural Produce and Livestock Marketing Act 2017. And in this regard, the central government has been persuading the state governments to adopt the features of this model legislation. So now what is the new announcement regarding these APMCs? Now the interstate trade and commerce is placed under the concurrent list. So accordingly, the center can formulate a law to promote, regulate and restrict the interstate trading of various goods. Now, as we note that the APMC acts are highly restrictive and they prohibit the farmers from selling their produce to whomsoever they want to. Now, as the APMC acts are restrictive in nature, there is a need to provide adequate freedom to the farmers to sell their produce anywhere within India and where they are likely to get a higher price. So there is a need to dismantle the fragmented agricultural marketing infrastructure and move towards an integrated domestic market for agricultural goods. So in this regard, the government had declared that it would come up with a new central law, and such a law would incorporate adequate choices to the farmers to sell their produce at attractive prices anywhere in India. Further, it aims at removing the barriers for interstate trade, and it also aims at a framework for e-trading of agricultural produces. So the government of India aims at removing the barriers for agricultural products or the marketing of agricultural products which have been created because of the APMC acts. So in this line, the government of India will come up with a model central legislation which will provide adequate choices to the farmers to sell the produce at attractive prices. It will also lead to barrier-free interstate trade and also a framework for e-trading of agricultural produce. So this will bring the agricultural products at parity with the industrial goods. And after this, let us look at an important announcement related to contract farming. Now, the third major administrative reforms announcement has been related to contract farming in India. So now what is contract farming and what is the current legal framework for such contract farming? So under the contract farming, the agricultural production can be carried out based on a pre-harvest agreement between the buyers and the producers. And in this case, the producers can sell the agricultural produce at a specific price in the future to the buyer as per the agreement. So there is an agreement between the farmers and the buyers. And these buyers are generally the fruit processing units or the exporters. Now such an agreement benefits both the producers as well as the buyers. And in this background, the producers can get the support from the buyer for improving the production. And such a support can be in terms of the input, for example, the technology, pre-harvest and post-harvest infrastructure. And the producer can also reduce the risk of fluctuating market price and demand. Now, on the other hand, the buyer can reduce the risk of non-availability of quality agricultural products. So this contract farming basically aims at benefiting both the farmers as well as the food processors or the exporters. Now, currently the contract farming requires registration with the Agricultural Produce Marketing Committee in few states. And accordingly, contractual agreements are recorded with the APMCs and which can also resolve disputes arising out of these contracts. Now, marketing fees and levies are paid to the APMCs to undertake the contract farming. So in this regard, the central government has formulated a Model Agriculture Produce and Livestock Contract Farming and Services Act 2018, and it provides for contract farming. Now in this regard, the central government has been asking the states to use this as a reference while enacting their respective laws. So what is the new announcement now related to? So the government will finalize a facilitative legal framework to enable the farmers to engage with the processors, aggregators, large retailers and exporters in a fair and transparent manner. Further, the new announcement aims at risk mitigation for the farmers and assured returns and quality standardization to form an integral part of this framework. So this new announcement has basically been related to facilitating the legal framework for contract farming. And as we note that the central government has already formulated a model law which it has been persuading the state governments to use or implement. And in this regard, one of the important clauses of the US Taliban peace deal, which was related to the starting of intra-Afghanistan talks, have now started. And these talks have brought the Taliban face to face with the representatives of the government of Afghanistan. And also, there has been participation of the Afghan civil society. Now, these intra-Afghan talks, which were a key outcome of the US Taliban peace deal, which was signed in the February this year, have been delayed for various reasons. And in this regard, the ceasefire announcement during the Ramzan was seen as a green indication towards the intra-Afghanistan talks. And now these intra-Afghanistan talks have happened. In this regard, one another important aspect here is that India has changed its stance on the Afghanistan peace process. And in this line, India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has attended the inaugural ceremony in Doha via video conferencing. And it was the first ever address by an Indian official at a gathering that includes the Taliban. So this is a major change of stance from India regarding the Afghan peace process. However, at this conference, the Indian External Affairs Minister stated that the peace in Afghanistan as a result of an Afghan-led, Afghan-owned process is a desirable outcome. And he has also made it clear that India hopes that it will not come at the cost of gains that have been made by the Afghanistan in the post-Taliban era. And these include the democracy, institution of governance, and the rights of the minorities and women should be taken care of. So, although there has been a change in stance of India regarding the participation in the Afghanistan's peace process, India has reiterated that the process of peace in Afghanistan should be Afghan led, Afghan owned, etc. So, in this background, let us understand the US Taliban peace deal. Why was the ceasefire announcement in the month of Ramzan by the Taliban important? And also various other important aspects related to this US Taliban peace deal. So, now the first important aspect that we need to look at is the US Taliban peace deal, and why is this announcement of ceasefire by Taliban important for the Afghanistan's peace process. Now, in the US Taliban peace deal, there was an important provision regarding the prisoner swap agreement. And based on that, the talks were to be started between the Taliban and the Afghanistan government. And besides the issue of prisoner swap agreement and the talks between Taliban and the Afghanistan government, there was also provision of reduction of the forces of the United States of America in the Afghanistan. Further, the US was also to lift the sanctions against the Taliban and work with the United Nations to lift its separate sanctions against the Taliban. Now, as the US Taliban peace deal provided for a provision of the prisoner swap agreement, and based on that, the talks were to be started between the Taliban and the Afghanistan government regarding the Afghanistan peace process, the ceasefire announcement by the Taliban on the occasion of Eid al-Adha is an important step. And why is it important? So it is important because since 2001, Taliban has announced ceasefire only 3 times. And previously it was announced in June 2018 and May 2020. And the Taliban had announced the ceasefire to mark the end of holy month of Ramzan. However, an important issue with those ceasefire announcements was that the Taliban did not extend the ceasefire on both these occasions, that is in June 2018 and in May 2020. However, this time the ceasefire agreement or announcement could be extended because the Taliban and the Afghanistan government are planning to start the intra-Afghanistan talks that were promised in the US Taliban peace deal. Now, these talks were to begin in the month of March. However, both the sides, that is the Taliban and the Afghanistan government, failed to reach an agreement on the prisoner swap agreement or the prisoner exchange agreement. But now the Afghanistan government has released more than 5,000 Talibani prisoners, and accordingly it is being seen that the talks will begin soon between the Taliban and the Afghanistan. And that is why the Taliban is likely to extend this ceasefire announcement, which it has announced on the occasion of Eid ul-Adha. Now, what are the issues that are being witnessed in the functioning of the US Taliban peace deal? So, various commentators have said that the Taliban is now having an upper hand in the situation that is prevailing in Afghanistan. And that is mainly because there were loopholes in the US Taliban peace deal that was announced recently. Now, the first loophole in the functioning of the peace deal was that the United States of America did not insist on a ceasefire between Taliban and the Afghan government. And accordingly, Afghanistan has been witnessing episodes of violence which has been perpetrated by Taliban. Further, the United States of America kept the Afghanistan government out of the peace process. And due to this, Afghanistan has again continuously witnessed violence which is led by the Taliban. Now, recently, presidential elections were held in Afghanistan. And this presidential election witnessed a very low voter turnout, due to which the main opposition candidate Abdullah Abdullah did not recognize the elected government for a considerable period of time. However, he backed off only after being appointed the head of High Council for National Reconciliation that leads talks with the Taliban. And due to all these issues, the Taliban is presently having an upper hand in the situation that is prevailing in Afghanistan. And accordingly, this announcement of ceasefire by Taliban becomes important because it is likely to kickstart the intra-Afghanistan talks, that is, the talks between Taliban and the Afghanistan government, which were first announced in the US Taliban peace deal. Now, further, as we note that in the US Taliban peace deal, US was to lift sanctions against the Taliban and was also to work with the United Nations to lift the separate sanctions on the Taliban. And accordingly, the UN Secretariat had recently held a 6+2+1 meeting on regional efforts to support the peace in Afghanistan. Now, in this meeting, six neighbors of Afghanistan, namely China, Iran, Pakistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan, plus two global players, that is the USA and Russia, and Afghanistan, attended the meeting. However, India was not invited to this meeting. So, now why India was not invited in this meeting? So, according to the UN Secretariat, India does not share any physical boundary with Afghanistan. Further, India did not support the US Taliban peace process. Further, India has been reluctant to talking to Taliban publicly, and this has contributed to the absence of invitation to India in this UN Secretariat 6 plus 2 plus 1 meeting. So, now in this context, let us look at what are India's concerns about the US Taliban peace deal. So, we note that India has not recognized the Taliban, and this has mainly been because Taliban has had links with various terror groups like the Lashkar-e-Taiba, the Jaish-e-Mohammed, who have targeted various Indians in Afghanistan. Further, India supports the democratically elected government of Afghanistan because it is being seen as friendly towards India. Further, Taliban as an organization gets a lot of support from Pakistan and the ISI, and hence the Taliban's victory in the peace deal would be a blow to India's effort to reach the Central Asia and to positively engage with the Afghanistan government. Further, we note that if Taliban comes to power, then there are high chances that China will get a free access to Afghanistan, and this will be an important blow to India's strategic interests in the Afghanistan and the Central Asia. Further, as we note that the Taliban has had links with various terrorist organizations which have targeted Indians, and if Taliban comes to power in Afghanistan, then India's efforts to fight terrorism in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir might also suffer a blow. So these are the concerns that have been raised by India regarding the peace deal, and accordingly India has not yet recognized Taliban. So then what is India's stand on the Afghanistan peace process? So according to India, the peace process in Afghanistan has to be Afghanistan led, Afghanistan owned and Afghanistan controlled. That is, there should be minimal interference of the other countries in the peace process of Afghanistan. Further, Afghanistan should build a national consensus for talks with Taliban. That is, it should include all the stakeholders in Afghanistan. Further, India was amongst the countries that had refused to recognize the Taliban regime in Afghanistan during the period of 1996 to 2001. And this was mainly because the Taliban's growth in Afghanistan was being driven by the deep state in Pakistan, that is, the Pakistani army and the ISI. So, accordingly, India's stand is that the peace process has to be Afghan led, Afghan controlled, and Afghan owned. And all the initiatives and processes must include all the sections of Afghanistan's society, which should also include the legitimately elected government. Further, any process should respect the constitutional legacy and the political mandate in Afghanistan. And there should be establishment of democratic process which should give respect for the human rights and include the women's right as well. So the peace process should not leave any ungoverned spaces where the terrorists and their proxies can relocate. And we note that India has been suffering because of the issue of terrorism, and accordingly, India does not want any space in Afghanistan which is controlled by the terrorist organizations or their proxies. Now, after looking at India's stand on the Afghanistan peace process and various concerns of India regarding the US Taliban peace deal, let us look at why Afghanistan is important to India. So, the first reason is that it is important for regional balance of power. Now we note that Afghanistan is tied to India's vision of being a regional leader and a great power. And further, India is engaged in a competition with China over resources, and also the Afghanistan is important for India to counter the Pakistani influence. So accordingly, India's involvement in Afghanistan and its ability to mentor the nascent democracy in Afghanistan will go a long way to demonstrate to the world that India is indeed a major power and also a responsible power. Further, India's interest in Afghanistan relates to its needs to reduce the Pakistani influence in the state of Afghanistan. Further, Afghanistan is important for India's energy security, And we note that the pipeline project, that is TAPI, seeks to connect the important energy-rich Central Asia to South Asia. And this project would only be possible if there is stability in Afghanistan. So that is why the stability and peaceful Afghanistan is important for India's energy security as well. Further, Afghanistan is a strategically located country, and it is important for India's access to the landlocked Central Asian countries that border Afghanistan. And we note that India has been involved in the development of the Chabahar port, through which it aims to connect to the Central Asian regions, and in this Afghanistan is an important player. Further, Afghanistan is home to very important natural resources, and according to the US Geological Survey, it has resource deposits worth $1 trillion, and that is why they can be very important for India. And finally, we note that Afghanistan's peace is important for the regional security in the South Asia. And if there is instability in Afghanistan and increase in violence due to terrorism, it is going to adversely impact India also, because India has been witnessing terrorism in the past decades, and which has mainly been perpetrated by terrorists which have got support from Pakistan and ISI. So in this discussion, we have seen the key aspects of the US-Taliban peace deal. Again, we have looked at an important aspect of this deal which talks about intra-Afghanistan talks and why is this ceasefire announcement by Taliban important. And after that, we have looked at India's concerns regarding this US-Taliban peace deal and what is India's stand on the Afghanistan's peace process. Further, what are the interests of India in Afghanistan? With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, this article on page number 7 is related to one of the important cultural figures of Tamil Nadu, Subramaniam Bharati. So, Subramaniam Bharati is an important cultural figure, and various aspects of his life can become important for us from the preliminary examination point of view in the topic art and culture. Now, Subramaniam Bharati is also known as Bharatiyar, and he was a Tamil writer, poet and journalist. He also participated in India's independence struggle and was also a social reformer. Further, he was popularly known as Mahakavi Bharati or the great poet Bharati. He was a pioneer of the modern Tamil poetry, and he is considered as one of the greatest Tamil literary figures of all time. Further, his works included various songs which were related to patriotism during the Indian independence movement, and as such, his role has been very important in India's independence movement, and as such, his personality becomes very important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. After this, the important aspect for us from the preliminary examination are his publications. And in this regard, he was a working journalist, and his writings in the Swadesamitran made an important contribution to the Tamil political vocabulary. Further, he wrote stories, commentaries, and was also a pioneer of the column writing in Tamil Nadu. Besides these, there is an important work of him that is known as the Gnanaratham. And in this, Bharati had an idea about the future and the dream of how a free India should look like. And various aspects of the dream form a part of his fantasy story, the Gnanaratham, that is the Chariot of Wisdom, which was written by him when he was still in his late 20s. Now, besides this, he was also a social reformer, and he stood strongly against the caste system. So in this regard, he fought against the caste system in the Hindu society, and he was born in an orthodox Brahmin family, and he considered all living beings as equal, and to illustrate this, he performed the Upanayanam for a young Dalit man and made him a Brahmin. Further, he also criticized the divisive tendencies that were being imparted into the younger generation by their elderly tutors during this time. And he openly criticized the preachers for mixing their individual thoughts while teaching the Vedas, Upanishads, and the Gita. And he strongly advocated bringing the Dalits to the Hindu mainstream. So these were his ideas regarding the caste system and his struggle against the caste system. So various aspects of his life become very important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, these two articles on page number 8 are important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. And in this regard, the location of these two projects is important for us. So the first is the Mekedatu project, for which Karnataka government is seeking a node, and second is regarding the leakage of water from the Konda Pochamma reservoir in Telangana. Now first let us look at why these locations are important for us. So if you look at the preliminary examination paper of 2019, this question was asked and it read, what is common to the places known as Aliar, Isapur and Kansabati? And the options were recently discovered uranium deposits, tropical rainforests, underground cave systems, and the final one was water reservoirs. And the correct answer in this case was water reservoirs. And accordingly, as we note that these two reservoirs are in news today and they can be important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. Now regarding this Mekedatu project, it is one of the important projects because it has been a cause of concern between Karnataka and Tamil Nadu over the Kaveri water dispute. And in this, the Karnataka government intends to build a reservoir across the river Kaveri near Mekedatu. Now, it was first proposed in the Shivana Samudra hydropower project at Shimsa, and its intention was to use the water for a hydropower station and supply drinking water to Bengaluru city, which is already facing a water crisis. However, the Tamil Nadu government has objected to this project of Karnataka, saying that Karnataka had not sought prior permission for this project. And its argument was that the project would affect the flow of Kaveri water to the Tamil Nadu. Now we note that interstate river water disputes are important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. And in this regard, the Mekedatu project, which lies on the river Kaveri and is a cause of concern between Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, also becomes important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. And the second reservoir in news is the Konda Pochamma reservoir. And in this, the water is leaking from this reservoir and it is located at Markog Mandal headquarters in Telangana. Further, it is a part of the Kaleswaram lift irrigation project. So the location of these two projects is important for us from the preliminary examination point of view, and in this, the Mekedatu is located in the state of Karnataka and the Konda Pochamma is in Telangana. Now this article on page number 14 is related to the deal between UAE and Bahrain and Israel. And in this context, questions have been raised regarding the future of the Palestinian movement because earlier these Arab countries were supporting the cause of Palestine. However, after the deal between the UAE and Bahrain and Israel, the future of Palestine is a cause of concern. Now, various aspects of the UAE-Israel deal have been discussed in detail in the Daily News Simplified of 30th August 2020 and 25th August 2020. And in this, we have also discussed this aspect as to what is the impact of such deal on the Palestinian cause. So you can go through these videos and revise from these videos the various aspects of the UAE-Israel deal and also their importance. Again, this article on page number 9 is very important for us from the Indian polity point of view because the question R is now officially gone. And this has been done because of the shorter hours of sittings that are available due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And various aspects of the question R and the 0R have been discussed in detail in the DNS of 4th September 2020. So do go through that and try and understand the basic aspects from the preliminary examination point of view. With this, we conclude today's discussion. Now let's take up the question for the day.